This is a presentation from the 2013 Cannabis World Summit. Please visit www.cannabisworldsummit.com for more great cannabis information, which is available to you completely for free. This information is being made available to you in part thanks to our sponsors. Please visit their websites to learn more about their excellent products and services. The following presentation is for informational purposes only. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Leaves of Hope Productions, Inc. Please note that regardless of any statements expressed or implied in the following presentation, that we do not condone you breaking any laws. We are not providing any legal, medical, or financial advice of any kind. No comments about cannabis being a cure for any medical use, expressed or implied, is to be taken as a claim or guarantee. None of the statements have been verified by the FDA of the United States, Health Canada, or the governing organizations of your particular country. And again, this information is being provided for informational purposes only, and the participants exercise their freedom of speech discussing what they believe to be true. We do not guarantee the accuracy of any information provided. It is your responsibility to evaluate the information before you choose to make any use of it. Please consult with a doctor knowledgeable about cannabis prior to using cannabis, and or prior to discontinuing any medications you may be currently using. Please check with the laws of your country and region to determine whether you are legally permitted to use and or grow cannabis prior to any involvement with cannabis yourself. Even though we believe that cannabis ought to be legalized, we do not condone you violating any laws. Please review the legal disclaimers on the Cannabis World Summit website and only proceed to enjoy this presentation if you agree with all legal disclaimers, agree to hold the company, Leaves of Hope Productions, Inc., and the presenters harmless and are of legal age in your region. Thanks to Kevin MacLeod and Incompetech.com for the music used in this introduction.
All right, so we have Matt Mernagh on the line here today. He's, of course, been hailed as the cannabis champion of the world because he struck down the Canadian marijuana laws a couple. Now, of course, this is still a work in progress here, but, of course, a lot of Canadians have been very optimistic about the work that Matt's been doing here. So it's our pleasure to actually be able to share with the world today what Matt's been doing, who he is, and, of course, what he's working towards, because, of course, he's got some big, ambitious plans in the near future as well. So thank you very much for agreeing to do this call, Matt.
Thanks for having me on your show.
I appreciate that. So a little bit, Matt, can you just share with us, how did you find pot? Of course, I understand that you had some medical conditions that led you to this. Can you just share a little bit of your story of how you came to discover that pot can actually help you, and of course, the journey that started from there as well?
I can do that.
To your arrest and all?
Yeah. I mean, it actually starts in about 1997. Well, 1997, I joined the Toronto Compassion Center as their 22nd member. Mm-hmm. And I was using marijuana for fibromyalgia and chronic pain issues. A couple years before that, I would say 94, about 95, I began using medical marijuana to treat this illness through street sources. Upon learning that the Toronto Compassion Center was open and accepting medical marijuana patients, I immediately signed up for this. I thought it was a great community service. I felt connected to a community of people that were like-minded and had the same type of illness. And you have to remember, very little information was still around that, and not even only as far back as 97. Mm-hmm. So medical marijuana was still exceedingly new. It wasn't very well accepted. And to get in and to have a doctor support me on this, I thought was wonderful. Quickly fast forward a little bit, and about 5 years later, about 2002, the Toronto Compassion Center, which had grown to well over 1,000, probably close to 2,000 members in 2002. Mm-hmm. What ends up happening is my friends, they were indeed my friends, my friend Warren Hitzig and my friend Zach Nefliton of the Toronto Compassion Center were raided by the Toronto Police, and they were charged with selling medical marijuana. Well, they were charged with selling marijuana, but to me, they were dealing with medical marijuana. So I'd have to say, at that point, I became exceedingly outraged. I couldn't believe that the Toronto Police would do such a thing as hurt my friends. They spent a night in jail. They had guns drawn on them. It was quite a horrific takedown. So that brought me out of the closet and into activism. And that was in 2002. I began writing for Now. In 2003, rallies began to happen, marijuana smokeouts, so we began doing those on 420. I just became very active from that point on. What ends up happening is we continue to fast forward from like 2008. In 2008, in April of 2008, I was charged with one count of growing marijuana for myself. I was charged with just growing marijuana in my home. The police were called for an emergency, and they discovered medical marijuana. And at the time, the very first comment from the officer on the scene was, "Well, it's Matt Mernagh. This must be all legal. Like, this must be a legal medical marijuana grow. Like, this is okay. Like, let's not all get all stressed out by all this."
Right.
And it was actually, the police were reluctant to lay the charge, but they ultimately laid the charge of one count, marijuana for myself, which in itself is a very rare charge. Very few Canadians get charged with just growing marijuana from themselves, and that made me fairly unique from there. I wasn't charged with growing and selling. I was only charged with growing for my own personal use. And that made my case unique from that point onward, because it clearly looked like the police were trying to tell the court something. Usually if you grow cannabis, you're charged with one count of growing it for yourself and one count of trafficking. They figure you're going to sell it to somebody. But in this case, it was all mine, and the police laid the charge accordingly. Fast forward. What ends up happening, we spend about 3 years preparing for this case.
Wow.
There is about 3 years worth of prep. And the reasons for that is because, one, the court moves fairly slow, but point number two is that Health Canada, we laid a subpoena on them. We went and said, you know what, they're not going to come to court willingly, so we're going to subpoena documents from our government. We're going to lay questions to them, and they're just going to send us documents. Well, what ends up happening in this process, they're like, look, here's how we agree on a process of we'll submit questions, they'll answer the questions, and they'll submit supporting documentation. So it's basically a Freedom of Information Act request done for the court. This is awesome. In my mind, this was the best thing ever. Like, we can start hammering away at the program and figure out our defense. What ends up happening is Health Canada would get the questions after the court appearance. We'd submit our questions, and then they'd get them. And they would wait. The Health Canada medical marijuana people would wait until the very last minute at 5:30 on the day before we were due in court to submit all their documentation and their answers.
Oh,
so we had
to prepare for it, in other words. So that was a strategic move on their part, obviously.
100% strategic move on their part. So what we would have to go to court would be like, well, they gave the documents to us at 5:30 yesterday. We don't even know if they've replied or not. So then they'd give us, follow-up questions. There is times when Health Canada would just simply not answer questions. And it was like, took a very, very long time, as I said. Long story short, what ends up happening through this process, we get these statistics. And the statistics they're going to come to court and say, the government program has increased in the terms of people accessing it by, I think they wanted to come to court, and I think they did come to court and say the program is increased by 500% between this time and this time, which is a huge number. If you really think about the government program, and that what turns out in the fine print, they were counting from zero.
Right, okay, well, technically that would be an infinite increase as well, but...
Yeah, exactly. So what ends up happening, we had a big box in these statistics, like they're just going to come to court and blow us out of the water right out of the gate with, hey, this program's running great. It's running so great, 500% increase. And when I looked at Paul Lewin, and I'm going to just finish this point, Paul Lewin's nervous, and I look at him, and I haven't even read it. I just read that one line, and I have years of writing for Now at this point. I know this government quite well, and I told Paul, I said, these numbers are bullshit. And Mr. Lewin says to me, Matt, we haven't even read the supporting documentation. How do you know that? Like, where? Like, he's looking at the same number I'm looking at. And I said, Paul, if these numbers were real, the Minister of Health would stand up in the House of Commons and say, our medical marijuana program has helped more Canadians this year than previous year. The number has increased by 500%. And her colleagues would stand up and pat her on the back for doing such a great job. Right? Because you can't defend against that.
Right.
No NDP, no opposition is going to stand up and say you're faking your numbers. If they were true.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
The reason they don't, and the reason she doesn't stand up in the House of Commons and say our medical marijuana is amazing is because she knows that it'll give the critic to the Minister of Health, Libby Davies, an opportunity to smite her.
Now, perhaps we should quickly mention here, of course, you mentioned Paul Lewin. He's your lawyer, just for the people listening to this call, so that they know who it is that you're speaking of. Of course, Paul Lewin's been instrumental in all your court case up until this point and continuing on. But also, I think it's also noteworthy to mention here that, of course, you could have, just going a little bit backwards here in the conversation, you could have easily decided to, as we were talking a couple of weeks ago, you could have paid the time for your crime, so to speak. Not that you were guilty of anything, but of course the path that you've chosen is a much personally harder path. You're of course now battling the federal government on a program that doesn't work, and so I think you need to be commended for that. But also, you're talking about all these numbers of people that, of course, you're saying that these numbers are bogus, but perhaps for the listeners to understand what's the problem here. Of course, the MMAR, which is the Medical Marijuana Access Regulation Program by the federal government of Canada, why is it not working? Why is this a court case? Just so the listeners understand, why is this even a legal issue at this time?
Well, in 1997, they created a medical marijuana program, and they never really consulted with the Canadian Medical Association. Mm-hmm. So what ends up happening is that they put doctors in the unenviable role of being the gatekeepers to medical marijuana. Your doctor is responsible for you to have access to medical marijuana. Mm-hmm. My argument is that, one, it's a plant, and two, one, it's a plant, and my doctor has doesn't study botany. Mm-hmm. So that's a big issue, is that your family doctor or a doctor is responsible to getting you access to medical marijuana. And it is a role they have routinely told the media they do not want to have.
Absolutely. And so, of course, so they have no real knowledge about medical marijuana, so they can't effectively prescribe it for a number of reasons. They don't even know much about other common herbs like echinacea or anything along those lines. But the point of the matter is this, is why are people fighting the system? Because they can't even get access to the system because doctors are unwilling to sign. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges people are having getting into the program, despite the fact that they completely qualify because of the medical conditions they qualify for entering the program, but they just are barred from accessing it because the doctors won't sign for it? I think I pretty much said it there, but...
well, that's it. You lay on that, and I'll respond to it by saying is that even though the case has my name on it, I'm the guy who brought it forward. There are 22 Canadians out there from this coast, from PEI to Vancouver, that have stepped forward, and they testified, and they never had to come forward. And those Canadians should, even though I know who they are, the court has forbidden me and the public from knowing their names, so all their information has been sealed. And these people should be commended. And we put out a call on my social media and through different networks, and we were looking for witnesses, and we had a large list of names of people coming forward, and we just started interviewing them. And I used my interview skills that I have developed I have 2 diplomas in media. Mm-hmm. So having the 2 diplomas in media made me quite well enough to interview people about their medical conditions, because all medical people can talk about their illnesses, let me tell you, if you talk to them correctly and you have the same type of woe and the same type of problems. And, we can connect that way. Okay. And I think that's what made our witnesses come forward so dramatically, is because they were talking to another medical marijuana patient. And so it's not just me, I'm the face, but 22 Canadians came forward, and then They can't get into the program. So we're not just one person saying. There's 22 people, and, geez, if I had to do this case over again, I could bring to the court thousands of people if I had the resources.
Absolutely. I'm sure that's absolutely true. Now, I know that you don't have too much time, so I'm just going to accelerate through this a little bit. Back in April of 2011, you actually won the court case. You actually struck down the marijuana laws, and, of course, the government was given 90 days to correct that situation. Of course, Canadians were excited, and, of course, the world caught your attention of what you were doing, and, of course, that's where you were hailed the cannabis champion of the world. Can you just share us a little bit about the experience when that court case got closed, and of course you were victorious. The government had 90 days. What were your thoughts at that point?
Well, it took us a long. It said 2011 in the charge, and I'm in the same hallway when I got the phone call. Paul Lewin called me on the phone, and I was at the Vapor Central. I was at the Vapor Bar, and I turned to my friend, and I looked at my friend Eric Compton, who I've gone to jail with, and I looked at him, I said, hold on a second, it's Paul Lewin on the phone, the ruling just came in, and I got to go take the call outside. Mm-hmm. So I take the call outside, and Paul's like, Matt, the ruling just came in, and by the way, you won. I was like, well, that wasn't it, it wasn't expected. We weren't expected to win. I think everybody put odds dramatically against us, but there was a core belief we would, and I've always believed I would win, and Paul's always believed we win, so that's what he said. I almost fell. I actually had to use the wall to hold myself up. My knees buckled. And then Paul said, oh, and by the way, you have an exemption from the marijuana law. I was like, pretty much in tears at that point, and I was falling over. And then Paul said, oh, and by the way, you struck down the marijuana law. They got 90 days in which to reply. And at that point, we knew we had them. At the rear naked show people, I had the government in for years, that I told them they would tap out, or the referee, in this case Judge Taliano, would note that they were unconscious, and we got them. We got them in a rear naked choke, and we put them down for the count, and I think our team did a fantastic job. To speed ahead, we went to they got an interlocutory motion, so they got the 90 days put on hold, and they began working on their appeal. I have a small legal team compared to the federal government's massive legal team that they were able to assemble for the appeal. So my legal team, it took them a little longer to prepare their case than they had originally anticipated, so that pushes it back the date. So what ends up happening is that it took us a while to get to court to prepare. Plus, we had several interveners on our behalf. We had the Toronto AIDS Society, which is a group of people living with AIDS. They hired a lawyer named Paul Bernstein, who's the president of the Criminal Law Association, to intervene on their behalf. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association intervened at Court of Appeal, and the British Columbia Civil Liberties Association intervened. And the court heard a fantastic case from the federal government. They had nothing, really. They had one plan, and they went after us on their one play, and, long story short, 8 months after they heard the case, the Court of Appeal finally decided on behalf of the federal government, so they reversed the lower court decision. I'm to be retried at some point. And so that's what ended up happening. And we're at the point, as of today, we're living under this amazing court decision from the Court of Appeal.
So, of course, just quickly to recap for people to understand. So, of course, back in April 2011, you won. And, of course, the government was given 90 days in order to fix the medical marijuana access program. Otherwise, it would be deemed unconstitutional, and all the marijuana laws would be strucken down in Canada, effectively legalizing it. Of course, they got the interlocutory, I'm sorry, my tongue twister, interlocutory, well, you know the word. They got a delay.
They got a delay.
And essentially, the delay lasted over a year. In May 2012, last year, of course, you had a 2-day court case. I pretty much took those 2 days off, as I'm sure many other Canadians did as well. And thank God for those people who were actually in the court case streaming the the information so that those of us at home or at our offices or wherever can actually listen in on and participate in that way. Of course, we were watching you, Matt, supporting you from behind the scenes. Our hearts were totally with you as well. And of course, I'm flabbergasted with the result that happened last month in February, because it sounded like the judges even themselves said, "Is that it? That puts you in the losing column." I remember it was one of the quotes. It literally sounded like the federal government didn't have a case, and yet somehow these three judges ruled against you last month. And so, of course, now two questions. Now, I know that just speeding forward a little bit here, you're now moving forward to going into the Supreme Court of Canada, which I want to ask you about as well. But before we do that, two more quick questions. First of all, do you have an exemption still, or are you technically now back to growing and utilizing cannabis illegally, if I may?
I'm back to, I'm back to where I started from. I'm back to what I usually do. I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm not about to stop. But
the cops aren't bothering you at this point? They kind of realize that you're sort of...
Well, I'm in Vapor, I set up Vapor, I'm in Vapor Central. We do what we do every day.
Right, okay.
So
Now, just out of curiosity, on February 1st, of course, when the news came out that, of course, that you lost the appeal, of course, the hearts of all of us were just completely sunk. I know I was emotionally devastated, because I've been paying attention to this every day for ever since back in April 2011. However, I'm sure that you, more so than anybody else, we could actually see it when we were watching you on Pot TV, that you were, of course, emotionally hit hard by that experience. But one thing that you mentioned also, I remember, is there's, of course, a clinic. So there are clinics that actually provide access to the MMAR program. You pay a few $100 access to that. You kind of alluded to the fact that you were contemplating perhaps going down that route. You weren't too sure. Now, just out of curiosity, Matt, knowing your circumstances, your health conditions, is there any reason why you haven't chosen to use one of those services where you can...
Well, I think it's a...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the services are there for people who wish to access them. I have a family doctor, a family physician who knows I use medical marijuana, and he's confused about the application process. I think that's a decision between me and my family doctor. It's a decision we can best make. And the issue with some of these private clinics is that I'm not sure where my medical files are going to go. Sometimes they're run by people in our community. Hey, send me your medical files and I'll help you along. And I'm like, what if you photocopy them and keep a copy for yourself? Or, if my family doctor refers me, then I could probably do it. It's not something that, these options are on the table, obviously. Mm-hmm. Whether I choose them, we'll have to figure that out in the future.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll see what you're going to choose down the road after the Supreme Court challenge, which I want to ask about the Supreme Court in just a moment. But before we do that, of course, in the meantime, before the ruling came out in February last month, of course, the government has been announcing a new version of the Health Canada program called the MMPR, which, of course, has got a bit of a modification twist. And, of course, a lot of people have been speculating that, they're trying to fix the program so that they can maintain the illusion of this program and still be constitutional and all. Can you just share some of your thoughts about the MMPR and how that affects Canadians, and especially those who have been able to grow their medical marijuana? How fair do you perceive that now they have that right revoked?
Well, I think there's a couple questions in there. Definitely the MMPR was designed to counter any 90-day attack. When we were in the interlocutory motion, we re-interviewed, or actually re-cross-examined Health Canada. And you can read it on Cannabis Culture. You can see a video that I made with the weed guy where we unload. They told us everything that they were planning on doing, 100%, except for the only thing they left off the table was they didn't tell us they were going to eliminate personal grow options. But they told us everything. They told us how that program was going to be dramatically changed. And that was in leading up to the May ruling. So it was over the TY Expo weekend, so we happen to have Cannabis Culture in town. So you can go back and see that Health Canada basically told us in this little room on Bay Street while they were being cross-examined by Paul Lewin exactly what they were up to. So we saw this coming. What they didn't tell us then and what they have told us now is that they intend to eliminate personal grows. And that's kind of interesting in that I like to point out, if you look at the photo of the Minister of Health when she announces the MMPR, the new program, the photo of her at that press conference, one, it happens on a Sunday. There's very little media on a Sunday. Two, it's also, she's not in Toronto. She's not in a capital city where there's a lot of media. She's not in Ottawa. She's nowhere near media. She is in the furthest reaches of British Columbia where very little media can get to her. I think that's one thing people should be like, there you go. And number two is look who she's surrounded by. There's not a doctor, not a patient in that photo. Not a doctor, not a patient. She announces a medical marijuana program. There's not one doctor nor one patient who's willing to stand beside her and say, okay, yes, thanks for listening to me during this process. Mm-hmm. Are you shitting me?
What's standing beside
Leona, it was all police and fire chiefs. Police chiefs and fire chiefs.
Which has
police chiefs and what the fuck do those people have to do with your health? Mm-hmm. Nothing. That photo should tell Canadians exactly where the medical marijuana program was devised by. It wasn't devised by the patient. It wasn't devised by the physicians. It was devised and cooked up by a bunch of fucking cops. And that's not a lie. You can see it in the photo with the Minister of Health. It's like, we got one on the patients and the doctors. There's nothing but fucking police chiefs and fire chiefs. They have nothing to do with health. That photo should tell people exactly what this medical marijuana program change was all about. If you can't see that in that photo, you're blind. It doesn't take a political master thesis genius to see where they decided to go with the program and who to listen to. They couldn't find a patient. They couldn't find a doctor. They found a bunch of fire chiefs and police chiefs who would gladly stand beside them.
Absolutely. And, of course, they have a vested interest in maintaining the prohibition, but, of course, that's another topic for another discussion as well.
Well, sure, because the medical marijuana people kicked in the door on the cops because they provided knowledge. And for years and years and years, medical marijuana patients have been the front line of activism in this country. They've been the front line people who say, you're going to arrest my recreational buddy? Well, fuck you, officer. You're going to arrest me, the medical patient, too. And that's what this assault is all about and nothing but. They're taking away our rights to grow, but you know what? I think there's going to be more people like Matt Mernagh standing up and saying, go fuck yourselves. You take away my right to grow? I'd rather sit in fucking jail with other growers learning how to grow pot for when I get out again.
Matt, it's astounding the world that we live in. Of course, there's a lot that I can say here, but I know that you're under time constraint here, so I'm just going to...
Well, I haven't seen the next interview yet, so we're good to go. Keep going.
Okay, well, anyways, talk about the Supreme Court, and of course I want to talk about a couple other little things about your TV show, your other things as well, but the Supreme Court, of course, right now, everybody in Canada especially, we're just on the edge of our seats waiting to hear what your next steps are going to be, because of course you, Matt, by the way, as I mentioned to you, like I actually replied on your website, that article, you need to be commended for the fact that there's so few people doing what you just said a few moments ago about people standing up for our rights. You're actually standing up for all of our rights here in Canada, and of course the implications go around the world as well, that of course cannabis use is completely okay, for medical and, of course, recreational use, and there's many other benefits to cannabis as well that's being discussed at the summit. But the point of the matter is this, is you're actually doing something on behalf of all Canadians, and we ought to be grateful, and thank you very much for all that you're doing. So tell us, what is it that you're doing, without revealing your hand, of course, so that the government doesn't know exactly what your strategy will be, but just something encouraging that us Canadians can actually listen to and hopefully get some inspiration and confidence again that you're still going to be hailed as the cannabis champion of the world, at least in Canada. What's your strategy now?
Well, you mentioned we're obviously seeking leave to appeal. We read that the ruling. I didn't even leave the office before Lewin said we're going to appeal this.
Okay.
And so we sought leave to appeal right away. We looked at this and we're like, all right, we're going to appeal this piece of crap. And so we are seeking leave to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. Now, the odds are only 10% of cases get accepted. However, we weren't expected to win the first time. So I got to tell people that, hey, with that lower court ruling when we won, we weren't expected to get that. We were expected, to get stomped all along. Mm-hmm. And so for us to get to this point, it's incredible. So I think we got that part licked. I think, if there's a medical marijuana case or a marijuana case to go to the Supreme Court, I think it's our case. They've never heard a medical marijuana case before. So Paul Lewin is my lead counsel, and he continues to work exceedingly hard. One of the lawyers who intervened on our behalf, Paul Bernstein, he's the president of the Criminal Lawyers Association. So he's the head, when it comes to criminal lawyers, this is the man. He is a genius of constitutional law. And so what ended up happening is that Paul ran into him at a lawyer conference, and he was like, you know what, I'm prepared to help you on that Mernagh thing. And sure enough, he his rates are through the roof, by the way. He agreed to work for whatever the Canadian or the Ontario government gives me in terms of funding. He agreed to work for that. So him and Paul both work for a fairly cheap rate. We're doing this by legal aid funding. A third group of lawyers called the Supreme Court Advocacy Group. Now, this is amazing to know. When we lost, they contacted us the next day and were like, we want to take your case. The Supreme Court Advocacy Group, they don't work with just anybody. They only do Supreme Court cases. They only do the prep work. We only do cases for the Supreme Court. That's all we do here. We are specialists of leave to appeals to the Supreme Court. And again, this is a group that, very few marijuana people have access to. So the fact that we built such a great foundation, we built such a great house, and resulted in some very good cannabis case law, has attracted more talented lawyers to the team. That's the very first, I have a dream team of legal lawyers. We can't get any better.
I'm actually getting shivers just listening to you, Matt. I'm just so excited about what you're saying here. So now, of course, you've done so much outstanding work together with you and Paul, of course, all along the way. You've had all these victories. You did the hard work yourself, and now you're getting the legal giants, the geniuses coming together to actually – I'm sorry?
That's okay. Keep going.
Oh, okay. Well, so anyways, I'm just really inspired by what you're saying. So, of course, now we're actually getting these, prize-fighting, MMA fighters on your team, so to speak, legally.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We've always thought that, Always thought we got a team that is phenomenal, and I would suspect by the fall we'll know if our application has been accepted by the Supreme Court. I believe it's going to be a positive outlook, and I've always stayed positive in this, and so those guys have figured it out. I don't want to reveal what their argument is at this point because they have to submit it still, and it'll be submitted in another couple of days. And but I think they got it. I think to kind of give people a heads up, I guess I can do that is. If you understand the basis of my case was built on the famous abortion ruling by Dr. Morgenthaler.
Yes. And
he argued that the abortion committees were simply illusory. They didn't exist. That's how people won the right to abortion and they got access to abortion, as he said, these are an illusion. This program's an illusion, and I argued the same thing. If you take the Mernagh ruling and remove the word doctor and replace it with the word therapeutic abortion committee, you'll begin to understand that the Court of Appeal seems to uphold the idea that therapeutic abortion committees are okay.
Okay, so obviously there's a slight double standard here when we contrast the abortion versus the marijuana. So looking forward to seeing
100% contrast is that they said, no, the doctor needs to stand in the way of Mr. Mernagh, but they're not, there's no doctor standing in the way of abortion. If you want an abortion in this country, you can get one. If you want medical marijuana in this country, you can't get it if your doctor says no.
Last question about the Supreme Court. What sort of time frame do you forecast or foresee that this could be taking? Of course, you're mentioning that you can find out by the fall. So are we talking another few-year process here? What's a...
Oh, yeah. You're probably looking at, they'll probably say, in 4 or 5 months, they'll probably say, yes, you're on the court calendar for 2014 this next year.
Okay.
You know, so this is, it's if you're going to march down this road, and I would encourage marijuana growers to say, I'm not guilty as long as they can hold out, and know that the end of the road, the deck is always stacked against you like Vegas card playing. But yeah, we got more fight left in us, and then there'll be some training. Probably about a year for us to prep our case.
Well, Matt, of course, myself, and I'm sure many others are going to be watching you like a hawk. Of course, we're interested in if there's anything that we can do, just, put out a call to action on your website. I'm sure many of us will read it and will support you in whatever way we can. But I know that you don't have very much time left, so let me just talk about your book and your TV show before we wrap this up.
Sure.
So, of course, you have a book that's been coming out for a while. Do you have a due date for when it's going to be finally released now?
Oh, geez. I'm being published by Green Candy Press. They're a professional book company, so that's the advantage there. I'll have major distribution across North America and in Europe.
Okay.
So you'll be able to go into chapters, and you'll be able to see my book there in such our borders. So anybody, if it's not there, you can even order it. So I have a great book deal. The issue with book deals is that, they take longer to write than they're scheduled to write. So the idea is I reviewed 150 marijuana strains, reviewed them like a music reviewer. So a lot of reviews these days are all broken down categorically. I smash all those ideas. I blazed the joint and wrote the words, This is how I felt. We don't use the word dank 150 times. So there's that. The book, I'm really excited. I think I'm going to have a Canadian bestseller in the nonfiction category, oddly enough. I know what the numbers are, and I know how many Canadian marijuana enthusiasts are out there, that I think the possibility of cracking that top 10 bestseller list for nonfiction in Canada is a distinct possibility. Even the publishers believe that. So we're looking at probably being out in the middle of May. By the TY Expo, you'll be able to get a signed copy.
Well, I will be there, and I'm going to be standing in line to get that book penned by you as well. Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And I highly recommend everybody listening to this, when, of course, this book comes out in May, get yourself a copy ASAP. For a couple of reasons, I'm sure it's going to be absolutely fantastic. From everything that I've heard about this book already, it sounds like it's going to be a pleasure to read. But also remember, this is supporting Matt, what he's doing. So if you're Canadian, please buy this book. Support Matt. Even if you're from around the world, somewhere outside of Canada, it's a fantastic book. Read it, and it's supporting Matt, which is he's doing something fantastic. He's the cannabis champion of the world. He actually was the first person to strike down these laws, even though, of course, it's still been lost in appeal. It's still a work in progress. But support the work that this man is doing. Get his book. Now, Matt, you also have a TV show, and, of course, I know that you recently changed venues, and now you're even talking about your website getting a new set here. Can you just talk a little bit about your show so that where can people find your show? Where can they watch? What kind of content?
Yep, sure. We're on the Livestream Vapor Central channel, so that's livestream.com/Vapor Central. We webcast out of Vapor Central, which is a bring-your-own-marijuana venue that my friend Chris Goodwin is the owner-operator of, and I've always been here since day one, and so our webcast is designed to show the world what goes on at Vapor Central. My webcast show, we're a little different than what goes on at Pot TV in that we're quite controversial. We're not designed for every cannabis enthusiast out there. We're a cross of, kind of like TMZ. If you know a popular American celebrity show, we talk token cannabis, whatever's in the news that day or that week or what we want to be talking about. It's sort of like if you were to have a session with me at Vapor Central, that's what the show's about. You're going to, if you were to have a session with me, we'd end up talking about porn stars. We'd end up talking about what movies we liked, what our mayor's up to, politics, marijuana politics, you name it, we talk about it.
Well, and of course, including your mayor, you definitely have a lot to talk about. Your mayor seems to he's in the news almost every other day with something crazy that he's been up to. But anyhow, that's a whole other subject for today. But anyhow, so of course, people can tune in, watch your show on Tuesdays. What time does it start and what time does it end?
That's 7:20 Eastern, and it ends.
Hello? Hello, Matt? Hi, Matt.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what happened there, but we seem to have lost each other. But
all right. Well, my next interview has arrived, so
okay. Fantastic.
If you need anything else,
listen,
I can.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and of course, people can go to Matt's website. Sounds like something's going on there. Hope it's not for you.
No, it never is.
Never is. So, anyways, Matt, thank you so very much for taking the time to speak with us today and sharing a little bit of what you've been through and where you're going. And of course, I know that the world will continue to be watching you. You're an interesting character, and of course, you're doing something very important for the world. So, thanks a lot, Matt. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good day too. Thank you.
Okay, and see your show tonight. Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.